There is no minimalist rule book. Well, until now. The Minimalists have created 16 rules for living with less, a free ebook which you can download right now at theminimalists.com/resources. Enjoy.
The Minimalists.
So apparently we're authors, podcasters, filmmakers, public speakers. When we started this 10 years ago, this The Minimalists, it wasn't even a business then. We weren't registered as a business. It was a domain.
Right.
It was a blog.
Right.
And in fact, we didn't know it was called a blog when we first started it, and this has been the joke ever since. Like, we always called it a website. We called them essays because we didn't know they were blog posts.
Right.
Because I had read essays, and I'm like, okay, I've never written essays, but I've
what
read.
did Divella call us? Essayists?
Yeah. I think
great.
so. Maybe it used to say that or somewhere. I've read that we were essayists somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, I wasn't a public speaker yet, although I was a private public speaker, meaning for the last 8 or 9 years previous to the website, I had been. It's one of the reasons I got promoted so high in the company.
Yeah.
Is I was the first person to do this. I started doing the monthly, what we called promo pack. It was like I would get up and give a hour-long talk in front of an entire, well, first it was a store, and then it was a region of stores, and then it was multiple regions of stores.
Yeah.
And I would get up in front of all those people. And the first time I did it, you were there. And this was 2000.
Was that in the Kentucky store?
No, we were in Westchester.
Oh, okay.
Westchester, Ohio. Yeah. And I had to speak in front of 8 of my 10 employees because 8 of you showed up. And I had to give, and I was terrified, Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
I had never spoken in front of 8 people before. But now I can speak in front of 15,000 people. We've done that. We did it last year.
Yeah.
And I'm not nearly as terrified as when I was speaking in front of those 8.
Yeah.
And it was building up that muscle of speak. And I'm sure it was terrible, even though I practiced a lot and prepared. But I got better and better and better through doing those rounds. I was doing it every month, several times a month, speaking in front of large crowds of people in the corporate world, taking the initiative, taking it on, not being asked to do it, but saying, hey, can I do this for everyone? And not knowing that skill would come in really handy because you and I have gone on 9 tours in the last 10 years.
Right.
And we've spoken in front of hundreds of thousands of people at this point.
I had to learn the really hard way. My first promo pack reading, you even told me, you were like, dude, the way you do the promo pack reading is you read it the night before, you fill in all the blanks. So for the people who are listening to this, a promo pack reading is you meet at the beginning of the month and you go over all the promotions for that month.
Right.
And the way we made a game of it where it was like, fill in the blank with certain with certain promos, and if they could guess the correct answer that went into the blank, then we would like give them prizes and stuff. So you're telling me read it the night before, and I was like, I don't need to read it, like I'll be fine. And I think I went out partying and like probably got like 3 hours of sleep that night, and I came in the next day and it was awful, man. It was so bad. Like I remember because you had left the you were, when I did it, you were already gone.
I left the Dayton stores, or
no? I think you. Oh, maybe. You know what? No, yeah, maybe you just left the Dayton stores. Yeah, maybe you were working downtown at that time. But I just remember doing it, failing, and then afterwards I went up to Stan Dukes and I was like, he was like, "You're no Josh Milburn." I'll never forget that. But anyway, it was a hard lesson in public speaking. I'm grateful for that lesson because it has made me take practicing very seriously. In fact, over practicing is that where I'm at now.
Yeah, and I think we do over practice now for whenever we go out on tour. Like we spend so much time in conference rooms going over and over and over and over for weeks and weeks and weeks preparing. So if you've ever come to one of our tour stops and seen us give a talk, that whatever talk you saw was many hours. Yeah. Hundreds of hours of practice.
Yeah. My public speech, 101 class was basically like for every minute your talk is, you need to at least practice an hour. And I probably do 4 hours for each minute.
I believe that.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, so we are authors, podcasters, filmmakers, public speakers. We just talked about the public speaking thing. That was unintentional. We went out on our first tour, 2011, and we've been on 9 tours since then.
Yeah.
And that first tour, though, was just a meetup tour. And we weren't really, we occasionally would get up and kind of give an impromptu talk. But what we learned from that was 33 cities.
Yeah.
What we learned from that was listening to what resonated. So I thought, we both thought the packing party was actually kind of I don't want to say a throwaway idea, but it was like, yeah, we already talked about it. We put it up on the website. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But people kept asking about the packing party over and over and over. I'm like, really? It's boxes. But I understand it now. But at the time, I was like, oh, like it didn't. And there were all these things I thought would resonate with me.
Yeah.
Ryan, I wrote this essay about channel surfing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still one of my favorite things, but it hasn't resonated. It didn't work then. It hasn't worked. In fact, I even tried to put a new iteration of it in our next book, Love People Use Things.
Oh, yeah,
the
got
editor's
cut.
like, hey, cut this whole section. I'm like, no, this was my one chance.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm learning now. It's like, no, it's not the idea that's wrong. It's my approach toward the idea. So I need to approach it from a different angle. But what we learned on that tour was how to approach things from the appropriate angle, I feel like. What really resonated.
Yeah. It's interesting how, like, when I think about when we went on tour in 2014 and we had a talk, or I had a talk, and then you would read from the book.
That was the big tour, the biggest one we've ever done. 100 cities, 119 events.
But that talk was an amalgamation of everything we had done up to that point. It was like, okay, what's resonating the most with people? What's adding the most value? And in fact, I think it was halfway through that tour that the Love People Use Things, we realized, like, oh, like the Love People Use Things because the opposite never works is like you see people like really resonate with that. I remember us starting to put that at the end of our talk, and it's like ever since, like that's kind of been, well, it sums up our message.
It does. And let me tell you where
that.
that came from initially. So we were on tour for this book here, if you're watching the video version, Everything That Remains.
Yeah.
And on the copyright page,
Man.
I always like to put a little nugget on every copyright page. And so right here, it just says published by Asymmetrical Press, copyright 2014 by Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, all rights reserved. Love people, use things, the opposite never works. Like, there's just a little tiny message. And that was before, that wasn't our mantra at the time.
No.
It wasn't, it was a little nugget, right? Like on Love People Use Things, the book, there's a little nugget on that, on that copyright page as well. But we usually don't talk about it. It's just there for the people who read the page. But yeah, you brought it up about a little over a third of the way into the tour.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I think you should, because at one point I said it as an answer to someone.
Yeah.
At the end of an answer, like basically we're just trying to tell you to love people and use things because the opposite never works.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, you were like, hey man, I think maybe like I saw people like really resonate with that. Maybe you should end the events with that.
I'm like, dude, that should be the very last line at every single event.